Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant, where I, Graham G.S. Matthews, review all the pay-per-views that I watch on the WWE Network, and today we're talking Breakdown 1998. Now, technically, this show is an in-your-house pay-per-view, but not really. It's listed on the network as Breakdown and not as an in-your-house show, and I will be talking about all those in-your-house pay-per-views at some point, probably next year. But for right now, we are just talking Breakdown 98, no in-your-house stuff. So, opening the event was Owen Hart versus Edge in a really good match, and honestly, one of my favorite matches on the entire show. Edge had just debuted that year. He had a really good showing here despite coming out on the losing end, but still a solid showing, nevertheless an impressive outing from the future 11-time world champion. And you can't have a bad match with Owen Hart. So when you put a future superstar with a, not a past star, but I mean Owen Hart was still very much at the top of his game at this point in time, prior to his passing the following year. So this was still a great match. Owen Hart scores the victory, and Christian would debut, I believe, here as well, showing up as Edge's ally in a storyline that really wouldn't go anywhere with Owen Hart, but still a good match nevertheless. After that, we had El Snow and Scorpio taking on Too Much in a decent little tag team match. Didn't really go anywhere, but it was alright for what it was. Too Much got some decent time. El Snow and Scorpio scored the victory. After that, we had Marc, Mero versus Droz in a match I didn't really care too much for at all. Marc, Mero scored the victory. By this point, Mero really was not damaged goods, but his time had passed. The Sable thing had already run its course. Actually, I think the storyline was already over by this point. I completely forgot. But anyway, Droz was Droz. Anyone who watched Beyond the Mat would know who Droz is and his puking gimmick, that horrid puking gimmick. But the match wasn't anything special whatsoever. Bradshaw versus Vader I thought was a really good match. Falls Anywhere match of that, it really worked with both of their styles. Vader was a great, hard-hitting competitor. Bradshaw was no different. It was more of like a passing of the torch of sorts, and that Vader was on his way out. I mean, he was still good. He was not as great as he once was. WWE, as I've said time and time again, completely wasted the dude in the 2 to 3 years that he was with the company. Still had a pretty good match on his way out, putting over Bradshaw on his way out of the company, so a pretty good match there. D'Lo Brown versus Gangrel, a pretty much a nothing match. D'Lo Brown went over, Gangrel sprayed blood in his face afterwards, so it was what it was. The Rock versus Ken Shamrock versus Mankind. How this match wasn't higher up in the card, I have no idea. But it was a triple threat steel cage match for a future WWE title match. The Rock emerged victorious just as Mankind was trying to escape the cage. Rock pinned Ken Shamrock in a great, great match. And The Rock was just kind of working his way up towards, single superstardom. He was only a few months away from winning the WWE Championship. Actually, when did this pay-per-view take place? What month? September, and he won this first WWE title in November at Survivor Series, so only 2 months away from winning that WWE Championship, his first WWE title at that. So great match there, in my opinion. One of, if not the best match, probably the best match in the entire show, but a really a career-defining victory for the great one. After that, Val Venis versus Dustin Runnels. Again, pretty much nothing match. The former Goldust, a match that really went nowhere. Pretty basic shit, not really that good at all. After that, we had Xpac and Billy Gunn and Road Dogg, D-Generation X, taking on the trio of Jeff Jarrett and Southern Justice, Southern Justice being 2 people. I thought it was 1 person for a second. I completely misread that on the Wikipedia page. Mark Canterbury and Dennis Knight. So an alright match. I mean, really nothing else to it. A better match than the predecessor between Val Venis and Dustin Runnels. So you can't really go wrong more often than not with a 6-man tag team match with enough people involved, with everyone holding their own, and the entertaining action. So it was a good match, albeit not great. And then we get to the main event, a triple threat match for the WWE Championship. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Undertaker and Kane. So the thing with this match was this. This was during the time that Vince desperately wanted the championship off of Austin. So what they did was that they made the stipulation that Taker and Kane could not pin each other, that they only could pin Austin to win the championship. And of course, they did the screwball finish where Undertaker and Kane both beat Austin by doing a double pinfall, and that it did not result. It technically resulted in a draw. The championship was vacated, thus resulting in the tournament that we would get going into Survivor Series to crown a new WWE champion a mere month, or rather 2 months later. But a really overbooked piece of shit, pretty much was what this was. Interference from Vince and all the other garbage, and I know it led to a post pay-per-view angle on Raw, and it's going to make me look forward to Raw to see what happens next. Just not a really good match, a really clusterfuck of a finish. Not the best way to go off the show, but the entire show, I mean, I've talked about it before, I'm just not a huge fan of the 98 pay-per-views just because the year was so chaotic, and that was part of the appeal for people, that the show, that year in wrestling was so chaotic and unpredictable, and it was unpredictable. I do appreciate that about 98, But the wrestling wasn't great. This show is very evident of that. Not a terrible show by any means. There were far worse shows in 1998. The opener was good. I thought that the triple threat steel cage match was good. The main event I thought was shit, as was the ending angle, but I did understand why they did it, to build intrigue for Raw. The six-man tag team match was alright. Everything else was just kind of there. I think the Falls Count Anywhere match was good, but nothing else really stood out other than the opener and that triple threat steel cage match. So any one match to watch the show for would have to be the triple threat steel cage match, number one contenders bout between Rock, Shamrock, and Mankind. But other than that, not really a show worth watching in its entirety, unless you're a big fan of nostalgia from 1998. So that is Breakdown 1998 as seen on the WWE Network. The next pay-per-view I cover will be Breaking Point. So we go from Breakdown to Breaking Point, 2 breaks there. No breaks allowed here on WrestleRant. Well, we will be talking about the Breaking Point pay-per-view from 2009, also seen on the network, and I've been getting a lot of requests for that show over the years. I know I've been doing WrestleRant for over 2.5 years at this point. A lot of people have asked me, when will you be reviewing Breaking Point? That's coming up in the next episode of WrestleRant right here on the channel, so be sure to check that out. But in the meantime, and in between time, folks, you guys can follow me on Twitter at WrestleRant, on Facebook at facebook.com/Graham.GSM.Matthews, and right here on YouTube by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. So until next time, guys, I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch you folks down the road.